Imagine that your hand is pointing at the center of an analog clock. And let's also imagine that the center of the clock is time zero. From that time zero orientation, we now have a way of describing the fundamental axes of wrist motion so that 12 o'clock is wrist extension, 6 o'clock is wrist flexion, 9 o'clock is radial deviation, and 3 o'clock is ulnar deviation. And if you think of them as diameters or pairs, then flexion-extension wrist motion is really a 12 to 6 motion. And wrist deviation is really a 9 to 3 motion. And that's pretty cool. But not all wrist motions move straight across a diameter of the clock face. Some of the sneakier ones utilize the full power of the wrist's 360-degree motion capability and actually trace a curve. This is Andy Wood's mandolin form. Do you feel the smiley face movement there? And as you can see, the upstroke starts up in the air, moves down to hit the string, and rises back up in the air again at the end of the note, creating another one of the fundamental pick stroke types, the double escape. And as you can see, there's no motion in Andy's forearm when he does this. So this is a wrist motion, and it's an interesting one that basically sandwiches two different wrist motions together. The top half of the motion moves along the 9 to 3 diameter, but when it gets to 0, it deflects ever so slightly toward 2, creating a curved pathway that runs through 0 in the middle. The upstroke is the reverse. It starts at 2 o'clock, then moves toward 0 along the 8 to 2 diameter. But once again, when it reaches 0, it deflects and starts moving toward 9. Once the pick reaches 9, the upstroke is complete and the whole process starts over again. If you watch what Andy's doing, you might think he's bouncing his hand up and down to create a curve, but that's not really what's happening at all. It's not down, up, bouncing like a basketball. Instead, it's 9 o'clock to the left and 2 o'clock to the right. 9 o'clock to the left and 2 o'clock to the right, except on a tilt. This produces a motion that looks like a shallow U shape, giving us an escape path at both ends of the motion. There are two big advantages to this approach. The first comes from efficient muscle usage. If we look at the muscles used on the downstroke, that would be from left to right, the ulnar deviation muscles until 0. And from 0 to 2, ulnar deviation plus a small amount of the wrist extension muscles. That's the downstroke. The upstroke is the reverse. To get to 0, we use the radial deviation muscles and a small amount of the wrist flexion muscles. And then from 0 to 9, just the radial deviation muscles. The genius of this is that the motions used for the two pick strokes, the downstroke and the upstroke, are completely separate. When the downstroke happens, the upstroke muscles get to rest, and when the upstroke happens, the downstroke muscles get to rest. No muscles have to pull 2 shifts in a row. It is a true alternate picking motion, where not just the pick strokes alternate, but the muscles do too, and that is why it's efficient. Another reason this motion is efficient is its flatness. The 2 o'clock side of the motion is very close to 3 o'clock. The motion path is almost a 9 to 3 diameter, just deflected ever so slightly when you cross 0. This makes it much faster than something like, let's say, a 9 to 12 motion path. With a hard 90-degree turn right in the middle of the movement, this would be a nightmare for speed and hard to do fast. Instead, players who rely on the double escape motion use the flatter motions with no muscle overlap for maximum efficiency. If we use a slightly more supinated arm than Andy, we arrive at Albert Lee's famous double escape technique. When you look at it up close, Albert's pick traces essentially the same type of shallow U-shaped pathway that Andy's does, except because Albert's arm is more supinated, his clock face path is different, 8-0-1. At the end of the supination spectrum, we arrive at one of the most famous double escape techniques in guitar, Steve Morse. Viewed close up, Steve's pick stroke once again appears to trace the same type of flattened out curve that Andy's and Albert's do. But because Steve's arm position is even more supinated, his clock face motion is yet another time zone over, 7-0-12. If you look at this path, it's very close to the 12 to 6 diameter, which is the flexion-extension axis of wrist motion. And this makes sense because if you look at Steve's motion from a wide camera view, it does pretty much look like flexion and extension in its overall appearance. And that's the effect of the maximally supinated arm position that Steve is using. In fact, all these players we've looked at, from Andy to Albert to Steve, are all using varying degrees of arm supination. But there is another arm position you can use for double escape motion, and it's this one. The amazing Molly Tuttle also exploits the power of shallow pick stroke curvature, but she does so from a pronated arm position. Pronation is what happens when you turn your arm toward the thumb, lifting the pinky side off the strings and creating a little air gap that you can see in Molly's form. Lots of great players play this way, like bluegrass master David Greer, whose raised pinky is also easily visible. When you use the pronated arm position to make a double escape picking motion, as both David and Molly do, what results is a clock face motion of 10-0-3. In this motion, it's the left side of the clock from 0 to 10 that's the blend of deviation and flexion and extension. It's the right side of the clock that's just deviation. And once again, this motion is very flat. It's almost a 9-3 diameter. So it's almost a pure deviation motion, it's just deflected ever so slightly to get to 10 o'clock. This is basically the inverse of Andy Wood's motion, where Andy's motion was pure deviation on the left side of the clock, and a blend of deviation and flexion extension on the right side of the clock. The fact that both of these motions are so close to the 9-3 diameter of deviation motion is what produces the speed and muscle usage benefits we've already seen, giving us, once again, our shallow and very efficient double escape motion. Cracking the Code viewers, you want to get better at picking technique, and we'd like to help. You just watched an awesome new chapter of the Pick Slanting Primer, which now includes everything you need to know about pick grip, picking motion, string switching mechanics like pick slanting, and how to take all this stuff and organize your lines on the fretboard to give your picking hand the easiest possible time of it. How do you get access to all this amazing stuff? Well, it's so easy. Just head on over to troygrady.com. You can grab the Pick Slanting Primer as a download product, or even better, you can check out a subscription and you'll get access to the primer and everything else on the website. How cool is that? It could be 1 month, 2 months, no big deal. Get in, get better, get out. As always, it is your support that keeps us going, and we are eternally grateful that you watch our stuff and enjoy it, and most importantly, get better. So if you have a moment, head on over to troygrady.com and check us out. And as always, thank you for watching Cracking the Code.